Welcome, everyone. My name is Jacob Schultz. I am the District 4 representative for the NATA Student Leadership Committee. And on behalf of the SLC, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar podcast. We have an amazing guest with us who has agreed to be here. But before I introduce him, I would like to provide a disclaimer. The thoughts and ideas here do not represent the National Athletic Training Association or any organization. I would now like to introduce our guest. Dr. Trevor Bates currently serves as the President of Wilmington College. Dr. Bates completed his bachelor's degree at Millikan University, master's degree at University of Illinois, and completed his doctoral studies at A.T. Still University, focusing on leadership and organizational behavior. Dr. Bates was previously the Vice President of Academic Affairs and Dean of Students, as well as Professor of Health Sciences at Mercy College of Ohio. Before that, he was the Chair and Program Director of the Athletic Training Program at Heidelberg University. Dr. Bates has served as a member of the Ohio State Joint Licensing Board. He has held the Vice President position of Great Lakes Athletic Training Association and is currently co-chair of the NATA Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Access Task Force. Dr. Bates, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Jacob. And anytime you hear like people talk about things you've done, you think, I haven't been busy at all.
You have been, though. After our discussion, I know you have been busy. It's been amazing. Okay, so Dr. Bates, to start us off, would you mind sharing a little bit about what inspired you to pursue athletic training and academia?
Yeah, absolutely. So I, in high school, was a student athlete. I was a wrestler and a runner. And I sustained my share of athletic injuries, overuse injuries, and things like that. But at the institutions that I went to high school at, we really didn't have sports medicine coverage on a regular basis. I think we had a physical therapist come in maybe once every couple of weeks. And my junior year in high school at the state wrestling tournament, I dislocated my left elbow. And so that was actually the first time that I was formally introduced to an orthopedic surgeon as well as an athletic trainer. They, on the mat, reduced my very obvious dislocation and gave me some information and ways to take care of myself. And they checked on me, throughout the tournament, because I think this might have been the second day of the tournament and we weren't going home, anytime soon. And, I got curious, but I really didn't think that much about it. And when I went to college and I was engaged in the wrestling program my first year there, and I was filling out some paperwork and took it to the athletic training room. And I saw some students who I was, in classes with, and I was curious about, what are you all doing here? And, is this work study? Because at that time I was a nursing major because I knew I liked healthcare and I liked science, and that seemed to be what I knew. And they said, hey, this is our major and this is, what we do. And we deal with the athletic injuries. And, I leaned in closer, and you can tell, obviously, I fell totally in at that point.
Awesome. And how about kind of that drive or the inspirational force to get you to academia with all the dean of students, vice presidency, now president? How did you get involved with that area?
Yeah. So when I served as as a program director, so let me start from the beginning, and I'll be quick here. So I was working at a little place called Lincoln College, Lincoln Christian College and Lincoln High School in this little town called Lincoln, Illinois, which is, I'm from the state of Illinois. I'm actually from Chicago originally. And I would precept students, and I was doing some adjunct teaching. And what I noticed was, many of the students who were coming to me to get their clinical hours and experience, they were having difficulty translating academics really into practice. And so, I got really curious about, what does that look like? What does the full-time classroom look like? And how does one class connect to the next? And how do students gain that confidence, to come out to the clinical setting to really apply what they were learning in the classroom? And so an opportunity, came, as I'm asking myself all these questions. I wanted to find a way to make a difference in helping those students. And, there was a position that I applied for at my alma mater to serve as a clinical coordinator. And at that time, my job duties involved being the head athletic trainer for football, men's basketball, and track and field, as well as teaching 10 credits a semester and being clinical coordinator. In today's world, that's an insane job, but that's what it was at the time. But I really found it to be productive because I could do exactly what I wanted in terms of making that difference. If I taught the modalities class or the evaluation class, I could take those students that afternoon out to football practice and help them see the opportunities to really convey and to connect what we were talking about into what we could actually do.
Mm, yeah, that's incredible. I think one thing that one question in my mind, you know, over all of your experiences and all of your kind of professional development, what kind of experiences or opportunities in leadership specifically did you see and did you really strive to go for?
So, my journey in leadership really came from curiosity. And so, as I said initially, in terms of being interested in moving into an academic space, I was really looking to try to solve a problem or contribute to a solution that, I really felt like it's not something you can talk about if you don't, intend to offer some sort of solution. And so after a while, looking at ways to connect clinical to academic, I got interested in the curriculum. So I said, who organizes the curriculum and gets to determine what happens first? And how do we intentionally make sure that clinical education and the didactic portion have a strong relationship? And I learned that that was a program director. And so I pursued an opportunity to lead in that way to really organize what I thought, based on the guidelines and the curriculum expectations at that time, the best way for students to learn. And, I started asking more questions like who gets to hire this program director person and these faculty and who gets to set admission standards for students. And so an opportunity came for me to pursue the role of being a dean and building curriculum and finding ways to say, what if a student starts with health sciences, but they really want to do athletic training? How do we help students see all their options? Because that was one of my challenges is I really didn't know that much about athletic training. Like I said, I was a nursing major. And so I said, how do we find ways to make that communication more clear? And then I got really interested in the organization of academics kind of in large part. And I said, how do you build relationships with the biology and the chemistry folks where our students have to take courses to prepare them to be successful in athletic training? And so being able to serve as a vice president for academic affairs was the ideal situation to say, I really can, kind of help connect all the dots, hire faculty, not just in my area, but to help everyone to say, we're all in this for one reason, which is student success. We want to prepare students. And then you get crazy, Jacob, and you say things like, who gets to write the policies for the college? And who gets to make the decisions about the vision of where the college is headed? And so crazy people ask crazy questions and they end up in crazy seats. And so today I sit, I'm close to my 6-month anniversary serving as a college president here at Wilmington. I also serve as a professor of sports sciences. And my intention, after I get a few more days under my belt is to begin teaching in the athletic training program here as well.
That's awesome. How do you think your background in athletic training and kind of that clinical aspect has influenced your leadership in academia as vice president and president of a college?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I learned is that what we learn in athletic training is extremely transferable. And so I'll give you one example. All of us learned this acronym called HOPS: history, observation, palpation, special testing. And so what I learned is when you have a patient in front of you, if you go through this process, that you understand the right questions to ask, you understand what you should be looking for, you understand what you need to touch, what you don't need to touch, and also you use the testing that's available to you to confirm or to help narrow down some of the things that you're considering in terms of a diagnosis or assessment. And so what I learned over time, and I actually gave a presentation at the Great Lakes Athletic Trainers Association some years ago on this concept of beyond hops. So how do you take that concept and apply it to leadership decision making? And so what I would say now is when I'm faced with a challenge, I will say, what's the history of this challenge, of this issue that we're facing? What have we observed about this situation outside of our institution, within our institution, in higher education? in other countries. And when people have touched the situation, when they tried to make an impact, how has that affected it? When it's kind of like if I press here, what happens, kind of thing that we do orthopedically. And then I would say, what are our options in terms of testing the potential solutions that we have? So if we try this and it gives us information to confirm what we saw, what we observed, what we talked about, and what we touched, that HOPS concept was so transferable. And it was kind of an aha moment for me to say, I've actually learned a lot about leadership and I didn't even know it.
That is so good. I've never heard that, and the way you're describing it, it's definitely like right along those lines that it is transferable to any situation. A patient encounter, something in your life, like you're describing, a policy or procedure at a lot of different levels of leadership. So I love that. I've never heard that before. Is that something that you kind of came across or came to a realization during your doctoral studies in leadership and organizational behavior? Or is that something that you kind of caught on to and that drove you forward in that organizational kind of leadership?
I think I figured it out when I became a program director, when I was trying to help students who would say, I want to find value if I change my major. If I decide to go from this program into athletic training, or from athletic training into another realm, or a different setting, how is what I'm learning valuable? And so that the HOPS is one example, Jacob, of different ways that I have really thought about what we have learned as athletic trainers. The things that we've learned in leadership is they're so similar to the things you learned in athletic training. Like, for example, preparation. As athletic trainers, Jacob, we show up not a few minutes before, but several hours before to make sure that we are fully prepared for not only the known, but the unknown challenges that day is going to bring us. And so if you're going to lead a meeting, an organization, if you're going to serve in any sort of leadership role, do your homework. Get there early, put the time in, because not only are there things that are going to happen, but there are always the unknown. And so what do? We walk down and walk through fields to look for different sorts of maladies or things that could be in the way that nobody else will do. And so that attention to detail that I learned as an athletic training student, as an athletic trainer, are things that today, when I talk to someone, I want to make sure that I do my homework. I want to make sure that I really understand all of the preventable things, and even kind of think about what are the things that I'm not even considering that could be a problem.
For sure. I'm an early career athletic trainer. I just graduated, and I'm really excited to be in the field. And I think that's something, that right along those lines is what I've seen as a characteristics of athletic training as a whole. That there's this independence that forces you to take all those things into consideration: the preparation, the knowledge, what to look for, what not to look for, everything that I see leaders in all of the athletic trainers. I see leaders in all of my preceptors. I see leaders in all of my peers coming out, and I see leaders in growing with the underclassmen that are coming up. And I guess I never really kind of drew those lines like you have today. And so that's really cool. Okay, to switch gears just a little bit. I'd like to bring up your role on the NATA Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Access Task Force, and some of the other DEIA work that you've done. Can you do a quick overview of what the task force is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So over the last year, clearly the world has seen all sorts of challenges, whether they be health challenges, social unrest. And I think that honestly, a lot of what we've seen is more visible to us because of technology. We have access to more information faster than any other time in history. If there's anything you want to know or that you want to see, you can share it in a second. And so I think that what we are more aware of is that there's a lot of work that we have to do to make sure that our profession of athletic training is as open and accessible and diverse as it can be, because it is in the best interest of our patients and of our profession for us to be inclusive. We want a person who, has an interest in helping people, who loves sports medicine, who really cares about people, to really consider athletic training as an option. One of the things I think that we know is that our population continues to change in the profession. At one point, Jacob, the majority of the profession was men. And now when I was or more recently, when I was a program director, 10 or 15 years ago or so, the majority of my students were not men, and they were students who were a part of all sorts of communities. And we were learning that, wow, athletic training is getting so much better because we have so many different thought processes and life experiences coming to this situation of helping patients. And the task force, the goal really is to help the NATA to take several commitments. It's made essentially 6 commitments, and to help make action steps to help sure that the organization is as open and accessible to as many people as possible. I can tell you from my experience that I shared earlier, I was not really exposed to athletic training at the high school level outside of a traumatic kind of a situation. And I think there are opportunities for our profession to help a wider variety of people understand how amazing it is to be an athletic trainer. And the work of that task force will be inclusive, and we'll reach out to the membership to say, what are ways that we can help people to feel more welcome in the profession, to feel like it's a place where they can be successful, to help our patients and understand what their needs are, to make sure that the policies and procedures that we put in place really give every person an opportunity, whether they be a traditional or a non-traditional student, for example, an opportunity to serve and to lead and to grow. And so it is really a broad conversation about really helping to show that athletic training is the type of profession that the best and the brightest students should really consider, and professionals.
Definitely. Have you done this sort of work before? This sort of kind of leading some change in this field?
Yeah, so I'll go back kind of far. So when I was an undergraduate student, I was curious about healthcare, and so I did just a kind of a small, I won't call it a study, but an inquiry about minorities in medicine. And so I said, I didn't see a whole lot of people. Actually, I didn't see hardly anybody in athletic training who looked like me. And so I wanted to learn, who are people who maybe have similar experience to me that can tell me about the profession and what their experience has been, and maybe help me understand if this is something for me. And it was great because I learned about all these really great pioneers about women and people of color and people in different communities and what they were doing, and that, wow, this is a profession that really I could serve in. And my actually older brother and I do some collaborating. He has a firm called True Empowering, and it's focused on consulting and really focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion work. He does a variety of things, and I've served as a strategist and an advisor to the organization. And his research has really been focused on this area of diversity, equity, inclusion, and the NATA adds access, which I think is an outstanding addition. And my older brother also, I called him the original Dr. Bates because he received his doctorate before I did. He also serves as a diversity and equity inclusion for a large school district, actually in the state of Kansas. And so this professionally is what he has done. And in our profession, I was also one of the founding members of the Ohio Athletic Trainers Diversity Committee, which has morphed and grown. And so my really intention to serve is to really help people to see themselves as a part of our profession and to know that it's a great profession to be a part of.
That's awesome. How how did you really get involved? Was it a jump off with your brother and being involved with his his business, or was it more just kind of your own work with the like you said, the Ohio Athletic Training Association? How did you get involved, and then also how do you think that that has kind of shaped your clinical practice and leadership at the collegiate setting?
Well, I think everything for me began kind of from a personal standpoint of saying, how can I be a resource to help people to understand that healthcare is a great profession to go into, knowing that they may not know as much or may not have access to athletic training services in their environment. Some of it's financial. My high school could not afford an athletic trainer full time, and we really just didn't have the access, and we really didn't have the knowledge. And so for me, it was more personal of saying, how can I serve in a way to help more people see what I didn't see at that time in my career? Because I kind of stumbled upon athletic training, and I think we can be a little bit more clear about those opportunities for people. And so that personal aspect to serve, kind of when you're called, to serve, I typically have answered the call. And for the young professionals on the call and students, I will say that one thing that I continue to be careful about and get better at is saying no, because sometimes you may want to get involved, but you really have to be careful in using your time in a way that you can serve the most. So this opportunity to serve in the NATA DEIA committee was excellent, and it kind of came along at a time when I was completing my service as a member of the Great Lakes Athletic Trainers as a vice president. And so it was it worked out timing wise because and I know we may talk about this later, but from a work-life balance standpoint, I want to make sure that I'm not overloading myself serving as a president and teaching class and doing all of the different things that need to be done. I want to serve in a way that I can be most effective.
Definitely. And I mean, that's a great segue into talking about that work-life balance. You have done a lot, and you gave that great example of being a clinical practitioner at the same time as teaching students, and kind of doing it all. How have you kind of found that work-life balance, and what kind of suggestions do you give to the young clinicians?
I would say, think about it like a budget. People will say the most important things in a budget are reflected based on the dollars you allocate to them. So think about your time like a budget. And so if you look at your time and say, where is most of my time being spent? And does that really reflect what's important to me? And so sometimes when you'll take a hard look and say, wow, I spend 6 hours a day playing video games, or I spend 6 hours a day on Facebook, or different ways that I might use my time. Is that the most valuable and most important thing to you? And taking that individual assessment for me to say, yeah, I could serve on a bunch of different committees, but can I do it effectively? And does it matter to me? Is it something that I really think that I can contribute to in that way of service? And so it's not about, for me, and I think for anyone else, it really shouldn't be about the resume. It should be about, can I serve in a way that helps other people? Because something my mother used to say to me is, when you spend your time focusing on and serving other people, your needs and the things that are challenges for you, you can rest assured that someone else is focusing on serving you. But if you're serving yourself, it's really not how things are lined up to be, particularly in leadership. In leadership, I believe to lead is to serve. I think that there is no other better definition. I keep it really simple. If I'm in a leadership position, that means my job is to serve the organization and the people to help it to improve. That's my job.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, again, kind of getting back to athletic training as a profession, and seeing younger athletic trainers, it is, we're there for the patients. We're there to serve them. We're there to, be a watchful eye for their health and their safety. And I think that's something that maybe most people can see that early in their education, but it's very evident once you're at that point of taking your BOC and graduating and really going into it. You're there for them. And so again tying in that leadership, it's like I feel like almost all athletic trainers are leaders. And so yeah, that's good. I like that. I also really like the time as a budget. I personally, I geek out over my own budget, but I think that's a great point to, I could see that transferable when talking with administration, at the secondary school level, at the collegiate level, and kind of explaining where and what you are doing. I think that's a good advocacy to make or let them see what we do, but then also what we shouldn't be doing. Um, have you kind of teetered with that, playing different roles about explaining and maybe having some hard truths with other leaders or other professionals about what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I had the opportunity to serve as a program director, one of the amazing conversations that I had over time with leadership at the institution I was serving at was, really kind of showing the value of the athletic training service, and to say, so if we provided 10,000 evaluations this year, if we provided X number of sessions of rehabilitation, if we did X number of internal referrals to our health and wellness and counseling center, to really quantify if we outsource that, or if those things were done using different methods, you know, how much that would actually cost. So how much not only are you providing in service, but what actually the benefit of that is. So it helped me make the argument of, we need more athletic trainers. We need to be able to provide more services to our students, because we know that if the students have great care, if they have a great experience from a clinical standpoint, that they're going to be less concerned and have to spend less time stressing about, am I being taken care of healthcare wise? Do I need to fill out this form? Who do I go to? Athletic trainers provide such a wide array of services, healthcare services to their patients. I won't just say the student athlete, broadly, that institutions, I have challenged, colleagues to say, well, if we believe health and safety, which this last year, every institution in the world has said health and safety is our number one goal. And so the question is, how does the budget reflect that?
Yeah, precisely. No, that's great. Um, so hearing about your journey and the shift, kind of not necessarily away, but incorporating more academia and more students as a whole, rather than patients or student athletes. How have you seen kind of your own approach to whether problem solving, or just kind of problems in general, changing from that clinical, in the thick of it, to a broader view?
I think one of the things that I have expanded my thought process is looking at the ripple effects. So kind of the if-then question I ask a lot more. And the other questions that I ask more of is, I defer back to the people who I serve, and to say, if I come to you with a vision or an idea or a concept to help us grow, I challenge people to ask me two questions: what if and what about? To really challenge, to make sure that I have considered and that I have the information, their expertise, to say, well, what if this goes wrong? What do we do when and or if this happens? Or what about these complications or this ripple effect or these challenges that we might face, or how someone else did this and how they succeeded or failed? Are we fully aware? And I think that good leadership really defers in ways to those they serve, to say, what am I missing? And what are the ripple effects if we move in this direction and make this decision? And even as an athletic trainer, clinically or as an academic, when the conversation happened a few years ago, and I say a few years, and it was more than a few years, to really consider moving the profession from baccalaureate to a graduate level, we started to have conversations at my institution at that time about, well, what if that happens? What does that mean for us curricular wise? What about the transition would be a challenge for us? What about our facilities? What about our academic level? Because we didn't have 3 people with doctorates at the time. And so we started to ask those questions, so that when things got closer and became more likely, we weren't shocked or surprised. We were prepared for prepared in the best way we could. I have to give a credit to one of my colleagues, Daryl Conway. He always says, if you can predict something, you can prepare for it. You may not be able to prevent it. And so I use that thought process to say, what can we predict? And are we prepared? And so if we understand that in that case, the profession of athletic training is considering this, how do we prepare for that most effectively? We certainly couldn't prevent it from happening. It was going to happen. But I think if you predict it and don't prepare, the outcome often is catastrophic.
Definitely, that prediction kind of aspect is huge, and I think that prediction aspect has kind of been rattled, in the last year and a half with the pandemic. And how do you kind of balance it? How do you see it? Because in my mind, trying to predict, it can get overwhelming. And like you said, I mean, we do a lot of different stuff, and trying to predict everything and prepare for everything can be overwhelming. How have you found that balance in prediction, but also staying grounded?
I think it comes down to teamwork. I think that if any one person tries to do it all or believes that they are the center of knowledge in some way, that they're fooling themselves. And so I think there are some things that are predictable. Like, so for example, we can predict that during a football season, we're likely to have a concussion occur more often in practice, maybe than in a game. And so are we prepared for that to happen? Do we have the resources and the information we need to handle something like that? That's an easy prediction. One of the things we're not, we could also predict that maybe less likely is that we might need to spine board someone in the middle of winter. And so the question is, are we prepared for that? And have we ever practiced for that? And so if we've never tried to use a tool to take off a helmet in freezing weather, which if your football team happens to be really good and they end up playing that far into the season and we're in the Midwest, it's a possibility. And so those kind of scenarios, I think sometimes we predict and prepare for the things that we are most comfortable dealing with. But we also have to think about some of those scenarios. One of the institutions I worked at, Jacob, was we suffered a season where there was a meningitis problem, and it's deadly. It's problematic. And so we were set up to be able to get the information we needed about students, their vaccination records really quickly, to isolate people, to get medical care very quickly. But what if we weren't?
Big problems. Yeah, for sure. No, I think that whole preparation is so ingrained into athletic training. And again, kind of as a young professional, I'm a little overwhelmed because I do want to prepare, and I do want to, be the expert in everything. But that teamwork that you brought up, that's so critical. You got to reach out to, your peers. You got to reach out to everyone around you for resources. And so, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Okay, so I want to take a step back, and I want to touch a little bit more on kind of your experience working in DEIA, and then also I would love to hear a story of your work with your brother, and then also kind of how I'm sure the conversations with your brother has influenced where you're at today.
Yeah, so my experience working to really promote and to really to support our profession and institutions that I've served to be as welcoming and accessible to all people. One of the things that I love about my current institution is we have a set of core values, and one of them is respect for all persons. And so when I look at that and I say, well, respect for all persons means that we are respecting their values, their customs, their experiences, in a way that, helps them to know that we want them to be a part of our community. Other core values here are diversity, their community, peace, and social justice. So these sorts of things are meaningful to me as a human being. And so they are reasons why I am attracted to serve certain institutions. So I would challenge those watching to say, what sort of institutional values and or background or experiences would help you know that you're a good fit for a particular service opportunity or maybe for a particular job? Because what you believe and who you are is something you want to connect. You're going to spend a lot of time at work. You're going to spend a lot of time at work. And so if you feel like, wow, being a part of this organization really connects to my values and who I am and what I want to contribute to society broadly, then I think you're going to find more meaning there. And so the institutions I've had the pleasure to serve, diversity has been a big part of their mission, been a big part of the goals that they've set to say that, we want to make sure that we are a reflection of the global communities that our students will serve. And we want to make sure that any student who chooses to be here, any faculty, any staff member, any visitor knows that they're welcome here. And so for me, as a personal aspect, I, find a lot of joy and a lot of, I would say, meaning when I can say something like, what I do is connected to not only the work, but also who I am.
Mhm. That's great. So in my mind, with athletic training students and really students in general, the college time is a struggle to find out who they are and what their values are. Have you seen any journeys, any adventures that really you can speak to that students find or have a better sense of, what their values are, and what kind of setting they really think they would succeed?
Yeah, one of the things, Jacob, that when I was an undergrad student, my one of my professors, faculty member, now Dr. Saika, he challenged me when I was a student to say, where do you think you could serve the most, and the best? And what are the things that you lack that maybe you need to improve on? And so I thought I was pretty good at a lot of stuff, but I really hadn't thought about where would I be best in serving as opposed to me being all over the place. And so I think if we think about it like that, I've talked to students and said, okay, you like football. Okay, that means you like contact sports. So what other contact type sports have you considered that if your ultimate goal is to serve working as an athletic trainer, working with football, how can you maybe build up to that if that opportunity is not directly there? Or if you really like performing arts, which a lot of students who I've worked with have been interested in, or in settings like the military. I think about my own experience when I left undergrad. I wanted something different. And so I went to the University of Illinois and I served a couple of years with their adapted athletics program. So I worked wheelchair sports. And so all of my student athletes they either had a physical disability that they were born with congenitally, or some were military veterans and they had amputations or other sorts of physical disabilities that really the adapted athletics program, the wheelchair sports program was a better way for them to demonstrate their abilities and success. And they were amazing. I'm talking, I worked with Paralympic athletes who are some of the most powerful and impressive people I've ever met to this day. And I was challenged to say, well, Trevor, if you're interested in rehabilitation, what haven't you done? What would challenge you, not just at what you're good at, but what don't you know? And why don't you put yourself in a position to learn and grow?
I love that, and I saw in my athletic training program that there were several situations that it was either maybe an evaluation that I wasn't really great at, but being alongside my preceptor, they were the ones to say, okay, you got to do this, you got to try it. I know that you're not confident in it, but you're not going to get there. You're not going to grow without putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation. Um, So yeah, I again, another concept that I see in practice in athletic training, but then to figure out who you are, exactly like you're describing. You got to put yourself in situations where you know you will grow, and you're going to be uncomfortable for sure.
Yeah,
For
it's
sure.
if I could add to that just a little bit, Jacob, when I talk with students a lot of time, I talk to them about their experience competing. And I believe most people know the secret to success, particularly those who have played an instrument, people who have played in a sport, they've been on a debate team, or whatever the case may be. Because when I ask people, so when you're unsuccessful in a debate, when you don't win a competition, when you didn't sing to the quality that you think you're capable of, what did you do next? And they all say the same thing. I practice, I go back, I look at it, and I find ways, I put the time in so that the next time I find myself in that situation, that I can perform better. And so what I then challenge, students and or colleagues to do is, well, if you know that's the secret to success, unleash it. If you're an athletic training student and you're not good at doing a glenohumeral assessment, or if you're not really strong at identifying certain conditions, what's the secret to success? And they can answer it. They usually, after that, they say, you don't need to say anymore. I got it. It's really, I think what we do in life is sometimes we find things that work and then we trap them in that arena. If you're really good at video games, how do you get better? The secret is really not a secret.
Hmm. And what's built in there is you got to work at it. You got to keep working. It's not going to be easy. um, One question that I wanted to ask you, is that you had experiences in a lot of different positions. You've talked about how you've expanded outside of just athletic training and athletic training programs. I mean, you're a president of an entire college. With all of that experience, where do you see athletic training programs going in the future? And then also, where do you see athletic training as a whole kind of progressing to the future?
I think athletic training has an outstanding future. And I say that because, looking at professions that are a little bit older than ours, we are making decisions and at a point of making transitions sooner than, some other professions have done so. So nursing's been around for a long time. And I think there's a lot of things we can learn from the profession because they've written just about every thing in terms of challenges or issues. And so I think we're in a position to learn from a lot of the successes and the challenges other professions have made. Most of them, the graduate level professions that are comparable, if you're looking at OT or PT or PA or speech or other, healthcare programs that have moved to the graduate level, we're in a position really to understand what were some of the pitfalls, what were some of the challenges, and how can we maybe limit. It's kind of going back to that, if you can predict it, you can prepare for it kind of thing. What do we know some of the challenges were for some of those professions, and what did they see enrollment wise? How did it affect the interest in their programs and their enrollment and their ability to attract a diverse student population and to get qualified faculty with the credentials that are necessary? Because these are not challenges that are unique to us as athletic trainers. But if we just look around a little bit, there's a lot of good examples that we can use to kind of understand some of the ways that we might make decisions.
Mhm. Well said. Well said. Um, so to close out our discussion, do you have any words to share, words of encouragement for those who are early in their athletic training journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I will tell anyone who is at any phase of their professional career that you don't need to know what you want to do for the rest of your life. All you need to do is think about what's next. And so if you think about right now, this is where I am professionally, what I'm interested in doing, what is one single way that I can improve from last year to this year, from last season to this season? One thing, not 10, not 15. Take one thing and pour your heart and energy into it. And then you'll look up 10 years later and you're going to be good at a lot of things. And I would also say, don't be afraid to try something. One of the best ways to know what you want to do is to also know what you don't want to do. And so sometimes some of the experiences I've had, they haven't been, things that I could see myself doing for a long time. But now I know, working with a broader range of people, I understand what they do. I can understand someone who has worked in a high school setting, or who's worked in a non-traditional setting, or who's been an academic, or who's been a clinician. And I can say, okay, I understand, some of the challenges you face, and we can communicate in a more effective way because I've tried different things. And so trying different things is certainly, it doesn't tie you into saying, okay, I'm going to be in the rodeo setting for the next 50 years. But if you have an opportunity, and you have the energy, at some point in your life, you're going to want to slow down. So I would say use your youth, use that energy while you have it now, but have the total intention to kind of pace yourself as you get older, because trying to keep that up, your life's going to change. You're going to, maybe build a family, maybe have children, maybe want to move to a different area of the country. And so the more experiences you have, it's all valuable. There's nothing you can do that would be invaluable. It's really just taking those experiences and helping shape, here's what I want to do now.
Those are very encouraging. And I think, again, tying in what you said about time being a budget, just like with finances changing, with your life changing, with different positions, you got to reassess that time budget. And I think that's tied in exactly with what you're saying. So again, thank you so much for being here and being a guest. I know the NATA has a lot of different DEIA resources. I'm excited to see what you do with the task force, and I'll definitely be tuned in. And with that, on behalf of the NATA Student Leadership Committee, thank you all for joining us. Keep an eye out for more webinar podcasts in the future, and definitely reach out if you have any questions about what we've talked about today. Thank you.
Thank you.